Raider Nation, what's going on? It's Mitchell Renz here, host of the Raiders Report, and today's show is presented by Manscaped. For anybody out there looking for the best male grooming products out there, go to manscaped.com, use code Raiders for 20% off and free shipping on the best male grooming products out there. I use them, Sam On use them, and if we both use them, you should do it too. Coming up here on the show, I got 5 burning questions, the top trending topics, the 5 biggest questions that I get from Raider Nation around Tom Telesco, Antonio Pierce, what the Raiders need to figure out at the NFL Scouting Combine, because free agency right around the corner. The NFL Draft is going to be here before you even know it. And if you're a brand new head coach regime, you got to figure out what it takes to get to that next level. So I got 5 burning questions coming up here on the show. For those that do not know, we're going to be doing an interview with Tom Telesco at the NFL Scouting Combine. He's going to be set to talk to the media at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday, February 27th. We're going to have our team out there for Chat Sports. They're going to be able to sit down. They're going to be able to talk to him. So if you want to know what Telesco has to say about the Raiders and maybe some of their future plans, hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. Here we go. Question number 1. Will the Raiders trade up for a top quarterback in the 2024 NFL Draft? If I'm the Raiders, this question needs to be answered by the NFL Combine. Like, it needs to be known before the Combine, before free agency, because the Raiders need to be able to paint a picture of what they're going to do going into the offseason. That's very important to me. When you look at the 2024 NFL Draft, to me, the number that you got to get up to guarantee yourself a franchise guy is number 3 with New England. However, with that being said, I don't know if it's a lock that 3 quarterbacks go off the board in the top 3. The more news, the more rumors that continuously come out indicate that, here's the thing, I do not know whether or not all 3 quarterbacks go in the top 3. In fact, I think 1 out of the top 3 does fall to maybe 4 to the Arizona Cardinals, then maybe that's your opportunity for the Raiders to trade up. The number 1 trade target I see for the Silver and Black is Jayden Daniels, the LSU quarterback, the Heisman Trophy winner, based on his connections with Antonio Pierce, based on his connections with Marvin Lewis. Another option could potentially be Caleb Williams. I will admit, I think Caleb is already a Washington Commander in my book. Hell, I actually think that the Commanders could end up trading up with Chicago to go up to number 1 to go get their guy. The other quarterback, though, that I would consider, and I am a big Drake Maye fan, right? No surprise to anybody that's watched this show before. Maye is my number 1 quarterback in this year's draft. I think he does everything phenomenally well, and he has some room to grow on top of that. However, though, there's going to be other teams competing for quarterbacks and the ability to trade up, because there's a lot of scouts out there that think those top 3 quarterbacks, it hasn't been that top 3 solid probably since, I'll say, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, and Tua Tagovailoa. And some of the teams that I could see trading up for a QB are the Commanders, the Giants, the Falcons, the Vikings, the Broncos, and the Raiders would be the top 6 teams to be able to trade up to even have a chance at getting any of those guys. So out of those quarterbacks that I just mentioned, who do you believe is the top quarterback in the 2024 NFL Draft? If you believe it's Caleb Williams, I want you to type CW. If you think it's Drake Maye, type DM. If you think it's Jayden Daniels, type JD. If you don't think it's any of them, well, hey, drop me another name. Let me know what you're thinking down below. The top quarterback to me for the Raiders, Jayden Daniels. The top quarterback on my draft rankings, Drake Maye. But if I'm going to sit up here and say that I fully believe in Antonio Pierce and what he brings to the table, and if you believe that too, I think you got to invest yourself in Jayden Daniels. Let's go to question number 2. If Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, and Drake Maye are gone, will the Raiders draft a quarterback? Like, you know, we sit up here on my show at least, and I talk all the time about trading up to go get your guy. There's absolutely a scenario where the Raiders don't have a plan in place, and they go, you know, we're just going to see how the draft falls. Maybe Jayden, maybe Drake Maye, maybe one of these quarterbacks ends up falling to us. What if they don't? What if none of them end up falling, and now the Raiders are in a spot because, let's say they didn't sign a free agent quarterback. They didn't trade for Justin Fields, and your main guy is Aiden O'Connell. You can't go into the next season, and the Raiders know this, they can't go into the next season with Aiden O'Connell as their top guy. So are they going to look at potentially drafting a quarterback? Well, I'll say this. Based on other quarterbacks that could potentially go, and this is the round projection that I see them. I have Michael Penix Jr. as my fourth best quarterback. If I'm the Raiders, I would target him in round 2, okay? I'm not targeting any of these QBs in round 1 because the Raiders need to be able to hit on their pick 13, and it can't be at the QB position. If you reach on a quarterback, you're reaching based on a position. I believe that the Silver and Black should go best player available at 13. Bo Nix, round 2 quarterback. J.J. McCarthy for me. I am very, very low on McCarthy. I know that some people think that he's going to go high, and he might end up going high in the draft. To those teams out there that take J.J. in the top 10 in first round, I have a second to third round grade on him based on the Raiders and where they're at right now. The other player then is Spencer Rattler, who I would potentially target in the 4th or the 5th round. If the Raiders don't trade up before NFL free agency, I could see them signing an NFL QB and a veteran quarterback in free agency. And the reason why that I say that is because what's going to be very important for the Raiders, and one of the reasons why Tom Telesco ended up getting the job, was he was able to paint the best picture of how the Raiders can solve their quarterback issue. And if I'm the Raiders, if you don't have the ability to trade up into the combine, then I need to know, okay, if I don't trade up at the combine, I might not be able to get my guy. And I don't want to be in a situation where I only have Aiden O'Connell. So that means you got to go out and you got to sign your franchise quarterback. It's going to be very interesting to see what the Raiders decide to do, though, in free agency, because they do have money. They can go out and get a quarterback. But does that make them the best team overall? I just don't want another situation where, I'm not calling Kirk Cousins Jimmy Garoppolo, but I am saying is it smart to invest $30 million plus in a QB that I'm not 100% sure? I think Kirk can get us to the playoffs. I don't think Kirk can win us the Super Bowl. And if you know that, does it make sense to spend the money? I don't know if it does. I'll get into my other burning questions here on the Raiders Report, but today's show is presented by Manscaped. And I'll tell you this right now. If there's one guy that I know that uses Manscaped, his name, Sam On. Manscaped's new Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra is every man's cheat code to look good, feel good, and turn the page on confidence this year. Whether you're going for a trim or that clean-shaven look, this trimmer has you covered. Trusted by over 10 million men worldwide, now is your time to get a grip on your grooming with our exclusive offer. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code Raiders at manscaped.com. Embrace a new you and definitely embrace a new trimmer courtesy of Manscaped. I've been using Manscaped for a very long time, and a lot of times I get asked the question. I get it more when I post a picture of Alex on my IG or on my social media in general, and people always ask, Mitch, how the hell are you punching up your weight class all that much? I'll give you the answer. It's Manscaped, right? Like, women, this might surprise you, care more about the way that you smell than maybe sometimes the way you look. With Manscaped, they have ball deodorant. I use the ball deodorant every single day. I sweat a lot. Hell, I'm sweating right now. It's probably because of Sam's just doing all crazy stuff to me today. But who out there uses deodorant underneath your armpits? Honest question. Do you use deodorant underneath your armpits? Yes? Hopefully. You should also use it on your ball sack too. And Manscaped has the tools to make sure you're looking good, that your Ken Stabler isn't living in a bush, and then also that it's smelling great. If you think about life, right? If they get down there and then they're like, it doesn't smell good, I'm out, you're going to be upset with yourself. Bottom line, use Manscaped. We're here to hook you up. Manscaped's here to hook you up. Use code Raiders. 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. That link's going to be available down in the comments, down in the description. DJ Loaded says he's got one. And if DJ Loaded's got one, you should get one too. Let's go to question number 3. Will the Raiders address their missing O-line pieces in free agency or the draft? If I'm the Las Vegas Raiders, I'm entering that NFL scouting combine. There's already going to be a few players that I have my eye on. I'm like, you know what? That's the guy that I'm going to target in the draft. But the reason why this is important is because with Las Vegas right now, you're not just missing one. You're not just missing two. You're going to be without 3 starters on your offensive line because Andre James, Greg Van Roten, and Jermaine Illuminor are all going to be testing free agency, right? And I've reported that Dylan Parham is expected to play center because Andre James is not going to be returning to the Las Vegas Raiders. But no matter what, you're not just replacing 1 or 2 positions. You got to be replaced 3. So you are going to have to look in the draft. I do think you could also potentially look in free agency. And the reason why that this is an important question going into the combine is because I love the depth in this year's draft for offensive linemen. especially in rounds 1 to 4. Like, I think the offensive tackle depth here is very impressive. I think the offensive guard depth is very impressive. Hell, I think there's a lot of really, really good centers. Like, I know that the Raiders' plan is plan A to put Dylan Parham at center. But if you're able to get a solid center like a Cedric Van Prawn from Georgia in round 4, you put him at center. You could then just keep Dylan Parham at left guard. I want the Raiders to potentially sign like one guy in free agency. However, what do they decide to do? Like, if you're looking at your top free agent offensive guards, the number one most likely person, and I've said this before on shows, is Damian Lewis. Yes, he is now predominantly a left guard. He was a right guard back at LSU when he was with the Raiders offensive line coach, James Craig. But his versatility is exactly like, I think, what the Raiders are looking for from an offensive line standpoint. Could you go a few other positions? Yeah, absolutely. Could you go cheap with Greg Van Roten and Damian Lewis? Yeah, absolutely. And then you also go look at your top free agent offensive tackles. I'm a believer that Jermaine Illuminor ends up coming back. And Jermaine wants to remain in Las Vegas. He does also want to get paid, which he deserves to get paid. I'm not going to give Jermaine anything over $6-7 million per year, and maybe that's not enough to keep him. But based off my conversations with Illuminor, he wants to remain a Raider for a long time. And if you're not sold on a lot of these guys, then you can look in the draft because it is a very, very deep draft. Let's go to question number 4 here. Is there a defensive tackle prospect that the Raiders like enough to not spend big in free agency? If I had a conversation with Antonio Pierce and Tom Telesco and they were to ask me, Mitch, where would you like to allocate all of your money, or not all, the majority of your money in free agency, I would say we have to get a defensive tackle. Like, you got to sign a big-name defensive tackle, or you're going to have to go out and draft one in the top 4 rounds. And the way that the draft is built, the defensive tackle depth is not, I'm not crazy about it, where when I look at the defensive tackle depth in free agency, I love it. And to me, I look at a Byron Murphy, a Jerzon Newton, and yes, I recently have done my rankings. I have Byron Murphy now as my number 1 defensive tackle in this year's class. Jerzon, he's at number 2. Then after that, I would say there's a tier break between Devondre Sweat, Leonard Taylor, Chris Jenkins, and Brandon Fisk from Florida State. He continues to go higher and higher up my board. But the reason why it's very important for the Raiders to find that DT is you got to take pressure off of Tyree Wilson. It's also a major need that this team has, considering the fact that they're going to lose a lot of their defensive tackles this offseason. So let's go. Let's get involved right now. If you're watching this live, if you're watching this on a later date, let's get involved down there in the chat. I want you to name a defensive tackle that the Raiders should draft, and which round are you targeting him? Like, when I do my mock drafts, the defensive tackles that I target a lot of times, if Byron Murphy's there in round 2, I love it. If a guy like Brandon Fisk is there in round 3, I absolutely love it. And out of the top 10 names that I just showed you, this is where I would target them for the Raiders. Now remember, the Raiders are picking at pick 13. So when I see Byron Murphy and Jerzon Newton, I actually don't like the idea of taking either of those guys at 13 personally. If the Raiders were to trade back, get a few extra picks, then I'm on board with it. Devondre Sweat, Leonard Taylor, Chris Jenkins, I'm on board with taking them at pick number 44. Fisk, I would like to get at 77, but if you told me the only way that I'm going to get him is at 44, I do think it's a little bit of a reach. But if you're looking for this year's like defensive tackle that's going to remind people of Crosby, and when I say that, I mean only based on the motor. Fisk was very, very good at the Senior Bowl. Raiders coaches were very impressed, and because of that, I'm willing to bet on somebody that goes out there, and I think he's got the best damn motor in this entire NFL draft class for all defensive tackles. Let's go to question number 5 here. Will the Raiders try to bring back Josh Jacobs or draft a running back? It was reported by Adam Schefter, and it wasn't really news. It was everything that we already knew about Jacobs, where Raiders weren't going to franchise tag him. They're going to let him test the market. However, Jacobs wants to return to the Raiders. Antonio Pierce and the Raiders, they want to bring back Jacobs. But this is the question that has been kind of involving the Josh Jacobs and the silver and black. Like, he's a great freaking running back. Nobody ever thinks that he's not a great running back. Antonio Pierce called him the heart and soul of this team. But if I told you right now it's going to cost $8 million per year, $9 million per year, $10 million per year to bring back Jacobs, we know Jacobs is a hell of a running back. Or you could use that $8, $9, $10 million to go get yourself a upgrade at the offensive line position, an upgrade at defensive tackle, an upgrade at another position, right? Like, if you told me that we could use that $10 million and go get one of the top defensive tackles in this year's class and free agency, I'm in. Like, I would rather allocate my money in that way for the salary cap because there's a lot of running backs in this year's draft that I like. And when you look at my running back rankings on here, I got Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson. They're probably the top 2 backs in this year's class. Depending on what type of offense you run, now these rankings that you see on here, they are solely based on rankings for the Las Vegas Raiders. Like, anything that I do on this show, I don't do it based on anything else besides for the Las Vegas Raiders. Like, I am a lot higher on Marshawn Lloyd than a lot of people. I think Blake Corum would be an interesting fit. If you were to ask me which running back would Telesco have his eyes on, it would probably be the Notre Dame running back Esteem just because he loves Notre Dame backs. Ray Davis is another name that I've heard from multiple coaches and multiple players of, hey, you got to at least keep an eye on this guy. So I want you to drop a name right now. Who is your favorite running back in this year's draft class? Because Zamir White proved me wrong. And Zamir showed that he can at least be a reliable back once you give him some touches, gets the ball going. He had a phenomenal 4 games to finish the season. But if the Raiders decide to not bring back Jacobs, and I know what Jacobs has said, but at the end of the day, it's got to make dollars and cents for both sides. And if Jacobs wants to go get his bag and he goes somewhere else, I'm not going to fault him for that. But what you can't have is have only Zamir White. I want to see what we got in Sincere McCormick. To me, though, you have to add another running back into this equation. My favorite running back in this year's class, based on value, right? I'm talking best value out there, Marshawn Lloyd. If the Raiders were able to get Lloyd, the running back out of USC, and the tape that I watch at him, the more and more tape I watch, the more and more I like him. He's short, he's stout, he's got phenomenal burst, he is a fast running back for his size, and just based on what the Raiders' offensive scheme looks like, if you're able to get Marshawn Lloyd in round 4, I don't know if he'll be there because I think this is going to be one of the players that shoots up the board after the combine. I'm telling you this right now, Marshawn Lloyd in round 4, okay, at pick 113, or signing Josh Jacobs to a deal worth $10 million per year, I will take Lloyd based off of what the running back position means, and also based off of that I could use that $10 million and allocate it to the offensive line or the defensive line. That's why Marshawn Lloyd is my favorite back. So what I want to know from every single person that made it this far in the video, one more time, who is your favorite running back in this year's draft class?